sure that you follow and subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. And be sure to share this episode with your family and friends and on social media because I have a great guest today. Joining me for the first time is the host of The Rest of the Story with Lara Logan. Lara, glad you come on to the program. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. I appreciate you having me here.
Well, you do such extraordinary work, and you've been in the field of journalism for a long time, and the trenches have changed, that's for sure. And you recently did an interview that I do want to discuss. But before we get to that interview that you did, I want to talk about just quickly the overall changes that you've witnessed in journalism over the last couple of years.
Well, technology was, the very first big shift, right? Because we went from where people were working in film, then to pneumatic tapes, which were the huge ones. Most of your audience probably doesn't even know that or remember it. And then it went to beta, and then it went to discs, and then it went digital. And these changes in technology did many great things. Probably the most significant was that it put the ability to do media and to reach people into the hands of the people. Unfortunately, what it also did is it took a lot more from us than it gave in many respects. And we were lied to, right? We were told only about what it gave and how it had improved things and made things better and easier and more convenient and so on and so on. And what they didn't tell us was that the price was our soul, right? Our freedom, our liberty, and everything else. And now what you have seen is once the people took this back, they took control in some ways of the methods and the mechanisms, right, in which to deliver information, which gave them a platform and a voice. Then those people with real power began slowly whittling away that power and taking it back. And part of that was to come after anyone who was an independent voice. You are not allowed to be independent. You are not allowed to be critical. You are not allowed to veer outside of the narrative. You can't move even a millimeter. Half a millimeter, you're dead. They don't want it. And the objective is they now realize, right, that they cannot keep this technology and these platforms out of the hands of the people. That's not possible. Too many people have it. I mean, you see them all around you. You see Emma Robinson, getting fired and doing her own show. You see Matt Taibbi being canceled and then coming back stronger than ever with the Twitter files. So, you see Glenn Greenwald. I mean, he has to resign from the Intercept, the place he created. He was one of the founders. And yet he has to walk back because the moment he wants to be independent, right, oh no, they shut him down. So, so what you see then is the strategy now is to keep what they call the screams, right? The hysterical screaming of everyone is far right, if you're involved in this. And they want to keep that siloed. So you're allowed to exist. I'm allowed to exist. We're all, all of these podcasts and blogs, the Joe Rogans of this world, he's right on the edge. He's a problem because Joe Rogan reaches both sides, or all sides, if you like, or are there even any sides? Bottom line is people, they don't want listening to Joe Rogan, listen to Joe Rogan. And they're not worried about, the people that are watching Alex Jones. They have given up on those people a long time ago. They're near the top of the hit list, right, for most irrelevant and annoying Americans who are not going away. And they're among the first that have to be silenced and censored and intimidated and so on and so on. But the list is long. And there's room on there for everybody. There's room on there for everybody who's not going to go along with the narrative. So if say you're Antifa, say you're an anarchist, you believe in defund the police, you don't believe in Israel, you believe in Hamas, and whatever you believe in. Right now, you're at the bottom of the list because you're kind of useful, and we need you to do our dirty work for us and to put the pressure on that we don't allow anyone else to put on, because anyone else goes out and demonstrates and does the things that you do. Well, we got a special place for them. It's called solitary confinement. It's where you can find a lot of January 6th defendants. So, but these people, they don't realize they're still on the list. And by the time it gets to them, we're still in the place where we can fight, right? We still have this show of yours. It's still people like you still brave enough to take this on, and by the time it gets to the Antifa, there's nobody left, right? There's nobody left. You just get, if you look at Marxist history, those are the people that get lined up against the wall and they just get shot. Because at that point, there are no systems left. There are no courts, real courts left. There is no real justice. There's only tyranny.
And that's the short-sightedness of these people, that they don't realize that sooner or later it turns on them too. And I find it absolutely amazing how freedom of speech was always perfectly fine with the leadership and the elite class until the people actually did have a voice, until they did have a mechanism to speak out, to see what's going on. That's when freedom of speech became a problem. And they don't even hide it anymore. I mean, they openly admit it. You have professors that will sit there and say that China was right when it comes to control and censor of the internet. You'll have former President Obama, Richard Stengel, come out and said that freedom of speech is now a defect of the system. It's not working as intended by the founding fathers, so it's a defect. But even the government itself, the government agencies, the bureaucrats in office, a lot of people will say, well, it's only the senior leadership within the bureaucracy. It's not your rank and file. But that's a lie, too, because it is a lot of rank and file that are ideologues that have taken over these institutions. And these institutions were once well respected, right?
Well, actually, it's interesting that you raised that point because if you study their tactics, what you learn is that they have a system of infiltration. It's not random or arbitrary. It might begin with who is the best target, and there might be, there might be some outside external factors in that they don't control. But once they get the system in place, they are now in control of that. And what the system is they go to the bottom three layers and the top three layers. Because if you go straight to the top and that guy gets removed, well, you don't know who's going to replace him. And number 2 and 3, they're next in line, right? So there's a good chance it's going to be them. But what if it isn't? What if, you go outside of the box and somebody from that, someone has distinguished themselves or someone's in favor or whatever, and they get taken from somewhere else in the organization? Well, they make sure that those 3 at the bottom, the reason they matter so much is that over time, they progress towards the middle and to the top. So if you're always getting the bottom 3 layers, you're always assured over time that anywhere along the structure of the organization is going to be one of your people. Doesn't mean everybody is yours, but you have options at every single level. And when people get taken out, they often get drawn, you replace them from within the ranks, right? So wherever that is in the ranks. So it makes sense, Comey gets out. Who's going to be the next head of the FBI? Well, you got Christopher Wray. And sure, Christopher Wray wasn't Comey's number 2, but he's an old FBI guy, isn't he? So what happens if you keep this system of infiltration going and system of pressure is even people who leave the organization, they can still belong to you because you can still keep them, you can keep them in your system of whatever it is, whether it's corruption that you're using with them, whether it's influence, whether it's money, you help them get a job in another think tank, or you help them get a job at, an NGO that maybe your partners that is in your affinity network. Because what these people have built, I learn all of this from them, right? I don't make this up. I learn from them. I read what they write and I listen to what they say. And they have described how they've built these, what they call affinity networks. So if you get somebody, one of the people that you've been nurturing inside the FBI, and they're done and they want to move on, well, you just move them to somewhere else in your affinity network and you keep them on your side so that when you need to move them back in to that organization, you have that option if you so choose. So, when you talk about how are they doing this? Well, they've got at least the top 3 layers, and at a minimum, they've got the bottom 3 layers to choose from. And then over time, they can pretty much pick and choose anywhere they want. And just because someone is doing this, at the FBI, and they've got other people at the CIA, and they got other people in the State Department, they can shift those people throughout that affinity network. And this has been going on so long now that is what you're seeing. And then on top of that, what they do is they create a system of terror within their own ranks. So if you think it's bad, if you're a Republican and you dare not vote for Kevin McCarthy, right? If you dare to vote for impeaching him, and now you're in trouble with the rhino establishment of the party, well, guess what? That's nothing compared to what they would have done to you as a Democrat if you voted with Donald Trump on any policy whatsoever. You were done. Okay. And you're not just done, not just your political career. Look at what they do at the 65 Project. That brings me to our January 6th series, right? At the 65 Project, which was created by David Brock and another woman who worked in the DNC, the Democrat establishment, worked for the Clintons. They created an organization that on the surface, according to them, is about protecting democracy and going after attorneys who spread disinformation and who participate in illegitimate attempts to take over this country by illegal means through pushing the narrative of vote fraud, by representing and empowering those people making those false claims. And it works with bar associations all over the country to have these people, in their words, punished, right? But what does David Brock say about that? Now, he was one of the founders who really one of the people, the brainchild behind it, right? And he was one of the people that selected Michael Teeter to run this organization. And Michael Teeter is a very experienced attorney. And when you look at what they say, Brock says it's not just about punishing these attorneys. We want to shame them. We want to make it so they can't ever be hired again. I think he says shamed within in their companies and in their communities, right? Which is effectively, it's not what he said, but effectively, that he said shame them in their communities and their company. And I'm saying what that effectively means is that's how you murder someone without killing them. You destroy their entire life. You take everything away from them, and including their ability to make a living. And what they were trained to do, right? And what they're heavily invested in doing and how they define themselves. So that's how you end up with people like whistleblowers, Tariq Johnson from the Capitol Police, 23 years in the Capitol Police. This guy evacuated the Senate and the House, right? This is not just your average police officer. This is a guy who was respected and trusted, who spent decades serving members on both sides of the aisle. And what's his first job? He has to take the only job he can get after he stands up and tells the truth. And that's working for a furniture removal company. I mean, how can you do that to people? And how can the people on the other side stay silent? They say nothing. They
Well,
just
they're
let it
easy. They're
happen.
cowards. That's the easy part for the other side. But as far as the bureaucracy, the Democrats that are all in collusion with each other, it's like this unholy alliance that exists. It exists in academia too. We see the seek and destroy mission. I mean, throughout COVID, they wanted to strip doctors' license away if they went against Dr. Fauci's narrative, science himself, Lord Fauci. But when we look at the January 6th thing, you just did a great interview, and January 6th still remains this huge puzzle. And unfortunately, nobody's paying attention to the real story when it comes to January 6th, because there are a lot of unanswered questions. I used to be in emergency management, dealt with sick reps all the time, threat analysis. We know security, there's questions about that. Now, before we actually get into the interview that you did, one of the things that always baffled me was the pipe bombs. You had a pipe bomb at RNC headquarters, a pipe bomb at
Yeah.
DNC headquarters. We don't have we have grainy video of it, but the FBI still doesn't have any answer. I mean, they have
Yeah.
answered.
Okay, so
Don't get
let's
me
talk
wrong,
about that.
but
Let's talk about that. You have a city, Washington, D.C. I don't know if you've been there lately, but that city, even at that time in 2020,
fortress.
yes, it's a fortress. It has cameras everywhere. You're in the park, you turn around, there's a camera following you. You're at the Capitol, on the Capitol grounds. You're at the Lincoln Memorial. You're at the Jefferson Memorial. I mean, you name it, right? All over that city. Obviously, the RNC headquarters, the DNC headquarters, these are critical buildings. They are heavily protected, heavily secured. And it's not just the cameras. There's facial recognition. There's probably voice recognition. I don't know that for a fact, but it's another surveillance tool. And then you talk about beyond that. You've got the NSA is the crown jewel of intelligence collection for the world. Every single digital signature is captured. And not only that, then you have everything that Edward Snowden exposed.
They know
All these
everything about
programs.
everything.
Exactly. And so then we're expected to believe that you can have that happen. And we know there's security camera footage because some of it has been released, not all, but some of it has been, either leaked or released. It's out there. And yet And you have a guy, one of the guys who's involved, if you watch the security camera footage, I know Ed Martin, an attorney out of Pennsylvania, he's working on this issue and he's put a lot of this stuff out. One of the guys leaves the crew that's moving the guillotine onto the grounds of the Capitol, and he goes and has coffee. He walks all the way up to the FBI headquarters, and he gets coffee from a food truck that's always open, because they know. How did they know that? Because anyone who works at the FBI or in that area knows that that food truck is open at that time of the morning, and you're going to get coffee when everything else is closed. But they still haven't found who built a guillotine on the grounds of the Capitol, which is, by the way, a counterterrorism zone. So if there's all these counterterrorism zones all over DC that were identified in the wake of 9/11 that are staffed by 24-hour underground control centers that all cooperate and talk with each other. All of these key areas in that city are leaked. They're linked. They're linked underground. And they're linked 24/7. You've got the park police who have jurisdiction over a large part of that area. You have the Capitol Police that has jurisdiction, and then some shared jurisdiction with the park police. If you have another layer with the Metropolitan Police Department, that's got another part of the city. And the idea that you can't figure it out. Plus, I really have to direct people to a report in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. This story, I howled with laughter, okay? It's not funny, but when you know the tactics and you understand how these people work,
Well, we
it
do
is
have to laugh.
so transparent. It is ridiculous. Read this article. You supposedly have a woman living in DC who has to walk around the block to get to her, to where she has to wash her clothes to the laundry. And when she's walking around the block on the day of January 6th, she happens to notice this pipe bomb just lying in the road. And of course, her road just happens to run to the RNC headquarters. And she's no expert. This is a young woman who's fluent in Mandarin, who worked in China when she was a student over there. She didn't have any problem getting a job. And lo and behold, she worked a pretty good job as well. I think it was a think tank. But then she moves to London, and she uses her language to work at another think tank. She works in counterterrorism. And when she sees this pipe bomb, which she describes in this article as laying out right in the open, she says somewhere in the recesses of her mind, in her counterterrorism training at the think tank she worked for in London, she thinks she remembers what a pipe bomb looks like, and she calls the police. I cannot even imagine that people would believe this. I know they do, and I know they don't have my experience. And, but there's a lot of people out there who see through that crap. This woman describes standing on the street, the police come, she tells the security officer, she doesn't call 911, she tells a security officer. The security officer calls the FBI. Then this place is described as crawling with police. There's people on the streets, and they get told it's so dangerous, you better take shelter. And she shelters with other people. And I cannot imagine the layer upon layer upon layer of absolute steaming pile of horse shit that passes for a story, okay, and passes for an explanation. That is just ridiculous. So I haven't investigated the pipe bombs. I can't tell you, it's this or it's that. I can just tell you that I agree with you 100%. The idea that they can identify people whose faces are completely covered with a balaclava. They can use facial and voice recognition and body recognition and all these other things, how these people move, who they associate with. They've got digital tools that allow them to use patterns of analysis, many of which were developed by Bill Binney when he was at the NSA, that they don't like Bill Binney anymore because he proved that the DNC hack wasn't a hack, it was a leak. And he proved that scientifically with data, and they discredited Bill Binney after that. But he had 2 floors of the NSA that belonged entirely to him. He had that many people in the premier spy agency in the world, and he developed these patterns for analyzing all these massive digital signals and making sense of this plethora of information that you have, and how you can use that to literally find a needle in a haystack. And they have all these tools available to them. In fact, they were rebuked by a FISA judge for using tools of mass surveillance for January 6th. So they can come out and say, I mean, you call the FBI, they're going to say, well, we don't have access to that. Well, that's a lie.
Well, that is a lie, because I know of 4 occasions last year where the federal courts actually lambasted the FBI for illegally accessing the NSA's repository on Americans, but yet there's no consequences because they know they can
Yeah.
get away with it. And if anyone speaks out against it, we see what happens to former agents like Kyle Seraphin and Steve
Yes, and
Friend. And,
Steve Friend. Yeah,
you
these are the
know,
whistleblowers I'm talking about. You're sitting there at home saying, gee, I hope someone from the FBI is going to make this stop. How? Because when FBI agents come forward and say this is wrong and I saw it happening, who stands by them? You made a remark, Professor. You said that people are cowards. And the one thing I want to say to you about that is not that you're wrong, but the reality of human nature. I think Tucker Carlson said recently that the one thing that has never changed from the beginning of time is human nature. We are who we are. And part of our DNA is survival. And so in order, we are by large in human beings are followers more than leaders. There are a lot of human beings who lead, but the vast majority, the only reason leaders succeed is because it's part of our human nature to want to follow good leaders or follow strong leaders and so on. Unfortunately, we follow out of fear. We tend to follow bad leaders as well. But the reality is that you cannot turn every human being into a leader. It's not in our DNA. We're not capable of it. And so, yes, you can say it's cowardly not to do this or not to do that. But the reality is, we're not going to win by going against human nature. That's why Marxism fails. That's why Marxism has to rely on tyranny and fear and murder and corruption and punishment, because it goes against human nature and it's fundamentally and profoundly evil at its core. If we want good to prevail, we have to be good and we have to stand up for good, and we have to reduce the cost of standing up. If you want more people to stand up, then you need to make it so that they're not going to lose everything when they do. You have to stand, and if you're a retired attorney, offer free legal advice. If you're an employer and you can possibly find room in your company to help someone for 6 months get on their feet, if you have money and you can give somebody the opportunity to you can pay it directly, pay their mortgage for them so they don't lose their home. There are so many things that people can do to help people who stand up. And as a journalist or people in the media, you can stick with those people. Don't turn your back and just forget about them. It's hard. I know there's probably whistleblowers out there who are saying, well, I tried to reach her and she hasn't done anything for me. And, I'm just one person, right? But collectively, we can do this. We can reduce the cost of standing up. I'm working on trying to do some of that, to create systems that help more people than just one person I'm able to help, because I think that's a force multiplier in a sense, right? That you can create something that helps many people and connect the people that can help. So I that's something I'm working on in the spare time I don't have, because I actually don't have any spare time. But I am but like a lot of people who see the reality of where we are now, I don't sleep much anymore because it's hard. I don't know how to just kick back and, hang out with friends and go out for dinner and live a normal life when I see that we're like a high-speed train hurtling towards obliteration.
And that's the terrifying aspect. You have, the whistleblowers like George Hill coming out. They're all sounding the alarm bells. A lot of people aren't paying attention. A lot of people bury their heads in the sand because it's frankly
Because the
easier to do.
price
They're
is
the
too
happier
high.
people in society. But even down to like simple questions. So you did an interview, and I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly. Tim Gannay, is that how you?
Some GNA.
GNA. So you
Yeah.
did an interview with him, and you're talking about Ray Epps. It was really fascinating. Can you explain to the audience, why Ray Epps is such a fascinating figure in this whole thing?
It's very, very simple. The reason the Ray Epps story hasn't gone away is that we don't know the truth. And there's something there. People today are sitting in prison. Some of them have been there for years without trial. These are political prisoners. And families have been torn apart. Some people, like Matthew Perna, have taken their own life. All for things that are far less, sometimes equal to, in some ways, what Ray Epps did. And yet Ray Epps is a free man. And so because that is just a reality. Now, that doesn't mean that Ray Epps is a Fed. Nothing I said means that Ray Epps is working for the FBI or working for, you know, another law enforcement agency or even working for another agency within the US government. None of that proves that conclusion, right? And so that's the problem that people have when trying to get to understand the truth here. We have one reality, which is that, you know, people are in prison, like Victoria White, perfect example. Here's a woman, a small woman. I've met her. I've interviewed her. She's smaller than I am. And this woman was beaten almost to death by not one police officer, Officer Bagshaw, but a second police officer as well. She's on camera, multiple cameras, having the living daylights beaten out of her. They're bludgeoning her in the head. She's got blood pouring down her body. Okay? She puts her hands up because she's been a battered woman all of her life, spending most of her time on the south side of Chicago, and she's had the living daylights beaten out of her by one boyfriend and baby daddy after another. So when this happens to her, she just goes into that posture. This woman just pled guilty to a felony count of obstructing police. Okay, when that is happening, not just to Victoria White, but that kind of thing is happening all over the country to hundreds and hundreds of decent American citizens. And Ray Epps is the only one on camera. There may be others on camera. There's a woman, Megan Paradise. She's being protected too. And she said some of the similar things on camera, but there's not the same amount of footage. Ray Epps was so prominent. He was out there on January 5th, the night before. He was out there again the following morning as people were marching. He was saying the same thing over and over. We've actually tracked down people that he met with in private, and he was saying the same thing over dinner. He was saying the same thing in private conversations that you see him saying on camera. So when you have all of this, he's the guy who's saying we have to go in to the Capitol, and as we found through our investigations, he was saying we have to storm the Capitol. And he was saying that the night before. We're here to storm the Capitol. I'm not kidding, man. That's what he tells Tim Giordano. And it's interesting because Tim Giordano could have been interviewed by anybody. I mean, I only got to him 2 years after January 6th.
Yeah.
And it had been a year that it had been out there, this footage of a conversation he was having with Ray Epps. He was right there talking to him. And Tim Giordano is not hard to find. He goes by the name Baked Alaska online. Now, the media hates him. They'll tell you he's a neo-Nazi. They'll tell you he's a right-winger. They'll tell you he hates Jewish people. He's a dumb kid. Okay, and Baked Alaska would be laughing to hear me say that right now. He would be the first to tell you that he was a dumb kid. He didn't know what he was doing. He associated with people that, you know, appeared one way to him. He didn't understand the implications. He didn't think a lot about some of the things that he said. They don't represent what he believes in. They don't represent who he is. But what they do in the world that I used to work in at 60 Minutes and at CBS and all the rest of it, if you knew someone was associated as they're a neo-Nazi, oh my God, I don't want anything to do with that person, right? They must be evil to their core. There's no redeeming characteristics about them. There's nothing to be gained by me talking to them. I'm going to go down with them. No thanks. They just give them a wide berth. So you don't have to own every journalist that it works at CBS or 60 Minutes or NBC or anywhere else. You don't have to own every single one. You just have to show them the consequences for them if they go near anyone that they have associated with this idea, rightly or
Fear
wrongly.
is the great motivator to get people to do what you want.
And again, why? Because the price that these journalists will pay for going outside of that and saying, you know what, I want to hear what this guy has to say. I'm going to listen. I'm going to make up my own mind. Oh, no, that gets you fired. And not just fired. That means no one else will employ you. So again, that's that price that I'm talking about. The price is too high. I was spared the price in a way. I mean, I wasn't spared the price. I paid the price, but I was spared the agony of that decision. Because when I was targeted, when I was at 60 Minutes and I was targeted over my Benghazi reporting, I had no idea that there was an entire ecosystem, both political and beyond, that was set up to murder people like me without killing me. You know, we didn't know back then. That was like 2011, right? I mean, we just didn't understand. Look where we've come in the last decade and a half. I mean, now we see things for what they are. And now these people aren't even hiding. You've got an organization like the 65 Project that's doing it to attorneys. And they justify it by saying that they're a threat to democracy.
Well, the
But, you
ones that
know,
scream threat to democracy the loudest are the ones that are totalitarians. I mean, let's just be honest. That's what it is. They want to
those are
usher in
your words, not
authoritarianism.
mine, Professor.
I will always say it. To them, they want to destroy democracy so they could save their interpretation of democracy.
You know, I don't even think it's that. I think we know we watch these people, they're on a path of total annihilation. They don't want anyone who opposes them to exist. They don't believe that you have a right to exist. And they say that over and over. Like, no attorney should be allowed to represent anyone alleging a claim of election fraud
That's why they use the words purge and re-educate and deprogram, or Hillary
and
Clinton's
punish
formal deprogramming.
and punish.
Yep.
None of us want to be punished. We're all scared of punishment. I mean, if you're like, you know, most people, I'm like this. I grew up as a kid wanting to please and wanting to do the right thing. I don't want to be punished. That sounds scary.
But when we look at it, where do you think this all goes? Do you think we'll get the truth, or if we keep pushing, or do you think that things are going to get worse before they get better?
Okay. So this is one of those questions, Professor, where it's like when I was a war correspondent at CBS, and they would say to me when I was live, you know, what was going to happen with the war. And I wanted to say to them, I'm not a prophet. I don't have some special gift. I don't see into the future, and I don't speculate. I'm a journalist, okay? So can I give you my analysis of the things that I see that show that we're on the right path, the wrong path, winning, losing? Yeah, I can do that. But what I would say to you is that part of the answer to your question is unknowable. And beware of the person that tells you that they know, because
Great
they're
point.
claiming too much ground. Okay. And so, you know, where does it end? Where does it go? Well, my opinion doesn't actually matter, because I could be right, I could be wrong. I'm probably right about some of it, wrong about, you know, maybe all of it. Anything is, you know, all of those are possible. So what do I do to try to understand? I go back to the source. I go firsthand, because secondhand can be misleading, and I go right to what they say. And they tell us exactly where we're headed if they prevail. So we know what the world looks like if they win, because they tell us, you know, by a certain year and not too far in the future, there will be no private ownership of cars. There'll be no gas cars. You'll be eating insects. You will not own anything anymore. You'll never own less and never been happier. I know these words are sounding familiar to you. So people hear that and they look at the situation around them now. They make an assessment based on their current liberties and freedoms and rights and the world as it is now. And what they don't factor into that is that the world in which you're going to start eating bugs is not this world where you have the option of going to the grocery store and buying something else. It's going to be a world where there isn't anything else to buy, right? They've just introduced lab grown food into pet food in Europe. The world that they plan and envision for the future is one where we're all existing on lab grown food, if you can call it that. And we have no ability to access or purchase anything else. I often hear people say, well, this is why you got to go off the grid. This is why you've got to, you know, be able to grow your own food. You've got to have chickens. You've got to, you know, buy silver and gold so that when the dollar is wiped out and we're onto a central bank digital currency and a social credit score, that you're going to be able to survive. Those are really, in a sense, tactical short-term measures. They might get you from here to there in the short term, in a sense of, from if there's a disaster, maybe you've got a better chance of surviving for a short period of time. But ultimately, store food for 10 years. Most people, you can't store up enough silver, or own enough silver, or hide enough silver, to help you survive 20 years. Your money isn't going to help you. This is so much bigger than that. So it really comes down, you're going to ask me, I don't have all the answers. Okay. I don't have all the solutions. I'm just one person. The only things I know for sure are the things that have always been true and always will be true. Just like I said, human nature doesn't change. Well, good is stronger than evil. If that were not the case, evil would prevail everywhere. But evil is constantly defeated all around us. God is more powerful than the devil. How do we know that? God created the devil. Right? I love all the people out there say, oh my goodness, did you hear how crazy she is? She's talking about God. There she goes on about God and the devil again. Except that we've got like Satan worshippers showing up at colleges and giving
Elementary
talks
schools.
to students. I mean, but seriously. So, and they're not crazy, by the way, just people like me. But I have to revert back to those principles, because I can't be a military commander and a politician and an economist and a biowarfare specialist and a farmer and a mother and and so on and so on. Obviously, in the short term, what is important, what we know has never changed throughout history, is that having good, strong local community of people around you increases your short-term chances of survival. That's true. So that is important. We do know that that the good people outnumber the bad, and that most people out there do not actually believe you can change your gender 50 times in one day. They just don't.
No.
Okay. And they don't believe there's more than two genders. Everybody out there, most people know that you die a girl when they dig up your bones 100 years later, 200, 2,000 years later, you're still a girl. That's how it works. So they're targeting now, that community is targeting anthropologists, because they want anthropologists to walk back all that evidence and all that knowledge and all that science. So these people are insanely delusional, because they've been exploited for, either through corruption and self-gain, or through vulnerability and fear and their own uncertainties and insecurities and self-interest, right? So we know there's only one truth. We know that. And if you're one of those people that still doesn't want to open your mouth, doesn't want to say anything, doesn't want, you got the kids coming for Thanksgiving, right? They're being indoctrinated at some college you're paying a fortune for halfway across the country. They're just home for a few days, dear. Let's not talk politics. We want to have a nice Thanksgiving. We want to have some good family time. I'm not saying have bad family time. I'm saying there are certain fundamental principles of survival for any society that we have to stand up for, or the society doesn't survive, doesn't stand a chance. And one of those is that we need to remind our children that it's okay to disagree, that let's talk about this, because those things are an opportunity. Those moments are an opportunity for you to put something in your child's head, so that when they hear those arguments at college, I'm not saying go to war, not saying, have it end in disaster and everybody storm off and get in their cars and leave early. I'm saying it's hard to be not confrontational, but show your children how confrontation and disagreement. I will sometimes disagree with my kids and they'll get really upset. Anyway, my point to you is just, if you stay silent, the outcome is guaranteed. We have no chance.
It certainly is, and I really appreciate you taking the time coming to speak to the audience. Everyone needs to check out the rest of the story with Lara Logan. It's phenomenal, and it's one of the few places where we still have actual journalism that's taking place. So, Lara, I appreciate you coming on. We're going to have links up at the PAS report, pasreport.com, and thank you so much for speaking to the audience today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for watching the show. We really It takes a lot of work. And I really want young people out there, especially, but not just young people, all people, to see that we do know there are people who know what real journalism is and what it's supposed to look like. I can teach people how to do this. It's actually isn't that hard, but it's expensive and it takes time and it does require hard work. And there's a lot of people that have sacrificed in order to make this happen. I have a great team. People say that because it's the political thing to do, but I'm not saying it for those reasons. I really do have, it takes a team to do work like that. You cannot make that happen without a team. That is a function of multiple people having real skills. And in this case, since we have so few people, it takes real commitment as well. So I just want people to know that, because we're fighting for a genre of journalism that is dying and has already been taken from most of the country. The First Amendment doesn't belong to corporations. It belongs to the people. And we are just little people. I'm a little person. And the people on my team, they're just more little people, right? But we, the people together, are doing something great. And it may not be perfect. There's things every week that slip in because of the deadlines that I'm like, but that's okay, because we, the people, are taking back the First Amendment. And the key thing about what you said earlier, we're on the wrong path. And there are very powerful forces and people that have engineered this path for us and that are benefiting greatly from it, starting with the technology companies and the people who control technology. But united, there's nothing they can do. And that's why they want us isolated from each other. They want to isolate my show and your show. They want to make sure nobody hears it, that we stay inside of our bubble. You can look at the mission statement for Facts First USA. Look at their mission statement. That's exactly what this organization was set up in order to do that, to keep us in this bubble and make sure that no one else hears the truth, right? No one else hears a different point of view, and that they keep deceiving people. So I just want to remind people, ultimately, at the end, at the core of all of this is God, truth, and unity.
And
That's it.
thank you for all the work you do, because it is important and people do need to know that. And I don't think enough of getting that message. So hopefully the message begins to break through.
Thank you, Professor. You take care.